This is the podcast to improve your English listening skills while learning something new in English. Every episode, we bring you interesting topics in simple and clear English, so you can listen, learn, and grow. So, sit back, relax, and let's get started.
Okay, so ready to dive in. Today we are looking at some notes about comparing and contrasting cultures. The learner, it's like unlocking this new way to see the world, not just your own background.
It's like seeing how everything fits together.
Yeah, and these notes, they really emphasize how important it is to actually talk about culture, especially, if you're learning a new language. They focus on these really essential parts of a culture.
The things that actually make a culture unique.
Exactly, yeah. Things like food, clothing, how people interact with each other, their celebrations.
All right, so let's get into this. These notes lay out some really interesting benefits to talking about culture, particularly for language learning. One that jumps out is that it can make your speaking sound more natural. And I think when you think about it, it makes sense because so much of how we communicate is based on our cultural background.
Yeah, it is. When you can actually discuss those cultural norms and traditions, you're engaging with the language so much more authentically.
You're not just memorizing words. Yeah, it's not just vocabulary lists. You're getting to the heart of it. And that actually brings up another point the notes make. Discussing culture really helps you expand your vocabulary in such a practical way.
You start picking up words and phrases for all those specific customs and traditions.
All the stuff you wouldn't necessarily find in like a typical textbook.
Right. It's like you're going beyond the surface level. You're moving past just like basic greetings, everyday phrases. You're getting into deeper territory.
Definitely, yeah. And it goes even deeper than that. The notes also talk about how discussing culture helps you understand not just the differences between cultures, but also the things they share.
Which is so crucial if you want to, connect with people from different backgrounds, like actually connect with them.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that when you see those nuances, those common values, and also the points of divergence, that's what builds the foundation for respect and for actually being able to communicate.
Yeah, real communication. And that ties into another benefit the notes bring up. It can actually boost your confidence in discussions. Because, when you have the vocabulary and you understand those nuances, you naturally feel more comfortable, more self-assured when you're talking with people.
It takes away that fear of saying the wrong thing or not being understood. It's empowering.
Yeah, exactly. So the learner, this all plays into wanting to actually learn effectively, right? It's not just about absorbing information, it's about using it. Applying it in real life.
Making it practical, yeah.
Okay, so now the notes kind of shift gears a bit. They encourage us to start thinking about our own culture. And to help with that, they give some Indonesian examples.
Okay, so let's start with food.
They mention rendang,
satay,
and nasi goreng as like these quintessential Indonesian dishes. So curious, when you think about your own culture, what are those staple foods or those truly unique dishes that come to mind for you?
Food is really like a window into a culture, right? You can see so much about a region's history and values just by looking at what people eat.
Even the way they prepare it, how they eat it together, it's all connected.
Right, like Indonesian cuisine with those vibrant spices often tells a story of community and connection. So think about what foods in your own culture hold that same kind of weight. What stories do they tell about where you come from?
Okay, let's move on to clothing. The notes mention batik being worn for special events, weddings, ceremonies, things like that, in Indonesian culture. So what about you? What comes to mind when you think about traditional clothing in your own culture?
Is there something special that's reserved for important occasions?
And what does it represent? What's the story behind it?
Because clothing, it goes beyond just the aesthetics. It can be a powerful symbol of status, religion, identity. Like that example of batik, it really showcases the value they place on tradition and craftsmanship. So when you consider your own culture's attire, it's like you're unraveling all those threads of meaning woven into the fabric. What stories are they telling?
Now let's talk about social customs.
The unwritten rules that guide how we behave.
Exactly. The notes give the Indonesian example of greeting elders with a handshake and a slight bow, which speaks volumes about their respect for older generations.
He's showing respect, yeah. So what about your culture? What similar customs do you have for greetings or just showing respect in general?
Because these might seem like small gestures, but they're super telling, like really insightful.
They're like little clues into the values and social structures that underpin a culture. And being aware of these customs, both in your own culture and others, it just helps you navigate those social interactions more smoothly. You know, you're showing sensitivity.
Okay, and finally, celebrations. The notes talk about Eid al-Fitr, that huge celebration after Ramadan in Indonesian culture where families and friends come together.
Yeah, it's a time of joy and gratitude.
So what about you? What are the important holidays or festivals in your culture? How are they celebrated? Who's involved?
What are the traditions, the foods, the overall feeling or the spirit of those celebrations?
Because these events really offer a glimpse into a culture's heart, you know?
Yeah.
Their values, their history, their social bonds.
Yeah, like those rituals and customs, those shared experiences, they're what bind a community together.
All right, so we've been focusing on looking inward. Now the notes shift to the art of comparison, and they give us some really simple but powerful examples.
Okay, what's the first one?
So they compare rice being a daily staple in Indonesia to, say, bread or potatoes in a lot of Western cultures. It seems so basic, but what can we actually learn from just that one dietary difference?
It's amazing, right? Like, something as fundamental as what we eat every day can reveal so much about a culture's history, their agriculture, even their social structure. Think about it, rice being so central to many Asian cultures. It speaks to the climate there, the agricultural practices, the whole way meals are structured.
Yeah, the whole culture around food. And when you contrast that with bread or potatoes being more prominent in Western diets, it's like you're uncovering all these different cultural priorities, different historical paths.
It's food for thought, literally.
All right, and the second comparison they offer looks at the importance of family gatherings in Indonesian culture versus a preference for more individual lifestyles in some other cultures. This seems to get at that whole idea of collectivist versus individualistic values, right?
It really does. It's a fundamental way cultures can differ.
So in collectivist cultures, you tend to see a strong emphasis on group harmony,
Family ties.
shared responsibility. But in more individualistic cultures, the focus tends to be more on personal autonomy, independence, achievement.
And knowing where a culture falls on that spectrum, it can really influence how you interpret their behavior, their communication style, even their expectations and relationships.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
Yeah, it's a huge piece of the puzzle. So the learner, this all really encourages you to think about those kinds of comparisons between your own culture and others you might be familiar with.
Absolutely.
Like what other everyday habits, preferences, even little things, What might those reveal about cultural differences, or hey, maybe even some unexpected similarities?
Go beyond food and family. Think about things like how people get around in different places, what kind of leisure activities are popular, or even how people express politeness or disagreement. It's fascinating stuff.
It is. Okay, now the notes give us some essential English vocabulary to help us talk about all of this. We've got tradition, tradisi, custom, kebiasaan adat, ceremony, upakara, festival, Parian festival, culture, budaya, compare, membandingkan, similar, mirip sama, and different berbeda. This seems like a really good foundation to start with.
It is. Having these words in your vocabulary, it really gives you the tools to talk about all these aspects of culture clearly and precisely.
Yeah, with nuance.
Exactly. Like even understanding the subtle difference between custom and tradition, or how ceremony and festival can overlap but also have distinct characteristics. It adds depth to your understanding. Like a tradition, it often has roots that go way back. It's something passed down through generations. Whereas a custom might be more of a common practice, more specific to a group.
And then a ceremony often has that more formal or ritualistic side.
Yeah, structured.
Well, a festival is usually a broader, more public celebration. So, yeah, those little distinctions can be really important.
They are.
Okay, so now the notes give us some example discussion sentences to see how we could put all this vocabulary into action. The first one is, in my opinion, Indonesian culture is very unique because we have so many traditional dances and languages. So what stands out to you about this example?
Well, first off, it's expressing a personal perspective that, in my opinion, that's key because it shows it's a genuine contribution to the conversation. And then it goes beyond just making a general statement.
It gives specifics.
Exactly. Traditional dances and languages. That's what makes it interesting. And it opens up the conversation, right? You can start talking about those specific elements.
Okay, the next example is, compared to Japan, Indonesian people are more relaxed in their daily activities. This is a direct cultural comparison, as the notes point out. So what makes this one work?
Well, it uses that clear comparison phrase, compared to Japan.
That sets up the contrast.
Yeah, and it focuses on a specific behavior, more relaxed in their daily activities.
Which, yeah, can be a bit subjective, but it definitely gives you a starting point.
Exactly, and you can build on that. Talk about work culture, social interactions, even just the pace of life in both countries.
Okay, the last example is, one similarity between Indonesian and Thai culture is that both countries have delicious street food. This emphasizes finding common ground, which is so important.
It is, because it creates that sense of connection. It builds bridges, helps you see past those surface level differences.
And in this example, that shared love of street food, well, that's something people from both cultures can connect with.
It's a great conversation starter, yeah. You can talk about all those culinary traditions, the ingredients they use. It's fascinating.
So the learner, these examples give you a sense of how you can frame your own sentences when you're talking about different cultures.
Yeah.
It's all about expressing your own perspective, making those comparisons.
Recognizing both the unique aspects and the shared elements. It's a balancing act.
All right, to wrap things up, the notes offer some really practical tips for having these kinds of conversations effectively. First up, use simple sentences. Why is clarity so important when you're talking about something as potentially complex as culture?
Well, it ensures that your message is actually understood, especially when you're communicating across cultures or languages. Simple sentences, they reduce the chance of misinterpretations And they help keep the focus on what you're actually trying to say.
Yeah, they get the point across. Okay, the next tip is to share personal experiences. How does that enrich a cultural discussion and make it more interesting?
Well, it brings it to life, doesn't it? Instead of just talking in these abstract terms about a culture.
It makes it real.
Exactly. You're giving real life examples, anecdotes that people can relate to. It makes those cultural points so much more vivid.
It's like painting a picture with words.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the notes emphasize being detailed.
Specific.
Like mentioning names of things.
Ways of celebrating, locations, times.
Why is that level of detail so important?
It's the difference between saying, we have a festival, and saying, every year in my hometown, we celebrate the Lantern Festival during the 3rd week of July. And we release thousands of glowing lanterns into the night sky.
That's way more compelling.
It's those details that make it come alive.
Okay, the 4th tip is to use comparison words like similar to, different from, compared to. We've seen how these can be effective. Why are these so important?
They're like the tools you use to analyze cultures, to understand how they relate to one another.
They give you a framework.
Exactly. They make those comparisons explicit and insightful.
Okay, and last but not least, the notes encourage you to give your own opinions. To use phrases like, I think, I feel, or in my opinion. Why is it so valuable to share your own perspective in these conversations?
Because it makes it a true dialogue. It shows you're not just repeating facts, you're engaging with the information.
You're thinking about it critically.
Exactly. And it invites others to share their perspectives too.
So it becomes this really dynamic back and forth. So the learner, all these tips, they give you a practical roadmap
for having those rich cultural conversations.
Whether you're learning a new language, traveling, or just connecting with people from different backgrounds in your own community. And it all comes back to that desire to really understand the world without getting bogged down in too much information.
Absolutely. It's about making those connections, seeing the patterns, and appreciating the diversity all around us.
Okay, so let's recap. Today we explored why discussing culture is so valuable. We looked at specific aspects of culture, like food, clothing, social customs, celebrations.
The building blocks of a culture.
And we talked about how starting by reflecting on your own experiences is key. Then we looked at ways to compare cultures, and we saw how even the simplest comparisons can uncover huge differences.
And also surprising similarities.
We covered some essential vocabulary to help you have those conversations, and we went through those practical tips for communicating effectively across cultures. So now you have a framework for understanding and sharing your own cultural background and for appreciating the incredible diversity out there.
And that brings me to a final thought for you, the learner. Think about those little everyday customs in your own life. The ones you probably don't even notice. The habits, the unspoken rules, the way you interact with people without even thinking about it. Now, imagine trying to explain those things to someone from a completely different culture. What would they think? What would they find strange or interesting? What stories do those small habits actually tell about where you come from and who you are? Exploring those subtle nuances can give you an even deeper appreciation for how rich and varied cultures really are. And it might just reveal some fascinating stories hidden in those everyday moments.
So keep exploring the learner.
Keep learning.
And we'll catch you in the next deep dive.
See you then.
Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully useful. Don't forget to like and subscribe.